Welcome to Johncast, an English language podcast. Hello guys, and welcome to this week's episode of Johncast, where we will be exploring some of the most compelling news stories from around the world. And we will do so in clear, thoughtful English that's perfect for language learners and curious minds alike. So, whether you're listening to improve your English or you just want to keep up with the world in a calmer, more reflective space, you're in the right place. Now let's dive into this week's top stories. Today we're starting in Spain, where frustration among locals has reached a breaking point. More and more residents are taking to the streets to protest what they see as the problems caused by mass tourism. Okay, so mass tourism is a big problem across the world, especially in Spain. And locals are fed up. They're taking to the streets. They're going outside in large numbers to protest, okay? Take to the streets. In places like the Canary Islands and Barcelona, many are saying enough is enough. That's a great phrase, guys. Enough is enough. We use that to say that something must stop because it has continued for too long. While tourism can help the economy, it is also causing soaring rent prices, making it harder for local people to stay in their own neighbourhoods. Okay, soaring rent prices. That's a great verb and adjective, soaring, meaning rising very quickly to a high level. And unfortunately, in places like Barcelona and Rome and Berlin, London, Dublin, rent prices are soaring. People are worried about the rise of short-term rentals, which means there are fewer homes available for residents, and as a result, neighbourhoods are starting to change. Obviously, a lot of these short-term rentals, these homes and apartments rented out for a few days or weeks, have come about since Airbnb arrived. You know, a lot of landlords and property owners choose to use their homes for Airbnb rather than renting them to locals on a long-term basis. I guess this story is not just about the holidaymakers enjoying, the sights and sounds of places like Barcelona, but it's about protecting local communities, services and homes to make sure everyone has access to decent living standards. And this prompts a big question. Can a city stay vibrant and livable while still welcoming the world? I've spent time in Barcelona myself, and I've seen firsthand these soaring rent prices and locals taking to the streets. And I think, as this story suggests, it's reaching a breaking point. And this happens, as I said, not just in Spain or Barcelona, but across the world. More and more people are traveling these days. And as a result, it's getting tougher and tougher for locals to find places to rent and to live in because everything seems to be a short-term holiday rental like Airbnb. So that's one to keep an eye on. And these protests I've seen taking place quite regularly in Spain. And perhaps over the summer you'll see more of it, given that summertime in Spain is such a peak period for holidaymakers and tourists. Over to the UK now, where a recent Supreme Court ruling has caused quite a stir. Okay, to cause a stir, to attract a lot of attention and reaction. If you think about stir, when you're making soup, you stir the soup. And to cause a stir means it creates a reaction. So this ruling from the Supreme Court has caused a stir. On April 16th, the court ruled that under the Equality Act 2010, the word woman refers strictly to biological sex. This decision has split opinion across the country, with many arguing it leaves transgender women without legal protections. Okay, so it has caused a stir, and it has split opinion. So split opinion is like divide opinion. Okay, this is quickly becoming a hot topic, especially on social media, where public figures and activists have spoken out, some supporting the ruling, others strongly opposing it. So it's a hot topic, something that everyone is talking about, and activists, public figures have spoken out. They've publicly expressed their opinions and concerns. They've spoken out because some people support this ruling and others oppose it. Okay, so the decision has also sparked debate around legal rights, identity, and how laws should reflect modern society. Another great phrase there, to spark debate. Calls people to argue or discuss different opinions passionately. Okay, to spark debate. This hot topic has sparked debate. Okay, and, this case puts some very big issues in the spotlight. cultural divisions, legal language, personal identity. And that gives us some food for thought. Now that this is in the spotlight, how should legal systems adapt to changing ideas about gender? Now, it's a very controversial topic, and as I said, it splits opinion, and it's a hot topic, but it's an interesting one. I'm not sure it's a topic to bring up in your English classes, but it's one that is worth reading about and reflecting on. Now we're moving over to Ireland, my own country, where the latest figures on homelessness are deeply troubling. Yeah, this is not a positive news story, and these numbers of homeless people in Ireland are deeply troubling. So when something is deeply troubling, it's very worrying or upsetting. Okay, so as of March, more than 15,000 people were living in emergency accommodation, the highest number ever recorded, including nearly 5,000 children. I mean, these numbers are huge. You have to keep in mind that Ireland has a relatively small population of, let's say, 5 million people, but this crisis seems to be getting out of hand. The reasons are complex. Soaring rents. Remember soaring from our story about Barcelona and mass tourism in Spain? Soaring rents, too few affordable homes, and a support system that's struggling to cope. So basically, the support system in the public sector is not able to handle and manage everything because, poor decisions from government and not enough investment. Advocacy groups are calling for urgent government action to build more housing and strengthen social support networks. So groups have been calling for this action for years, and we're still waiting, okay? When you call for something, you strongly demand it or ask for it, especially in public, okay? For example, the locals and residents in Spain are calling for action to combat mass tourism. And this situation in Ireland is a sobering reminder that economic growth doesn't automatically mean security for everyone. Ireland has experienced massive economic growth in the last 30 years, especially in recent years, but unfortunately, some people get left behind. And it's a sobering reminder, something that makes you realize a serious or unpleasant truth, okay? So the reflection point of this really is, what responsibility does a country have to ensure shelter for its most vulnerable citizens? Okay, shelter here means providing a safe and protected place to stay. So what responsibility does a country have? And of course, the responsibility lies with the government, and they have to take action. They have to take preventative action in the first place, and then if there is a problem like there seems to be now in Ireland, they need to act fast. Next, something a little more unexpected and wonderfully surreal from Argentina. So hello to the Argentinians out there listening from the Southern Hemisphere, and maybe you've heard of this story in your own news, but the plush neighbourhood of North Delta near Buenos Aires has been taken over by an unlikely group of capybaras. So plush here means very comfortable and expensive looking. Okay, plush neighbourhood. You could also describe, for example, furniture as plush or decor or hotel plush. So these cute capybaras, over 1,000 of them, have moved into this manicured, gated community, eating their way through gardens, blocking traffic and even confronting pets. We don't have capybaras in Ireland, but it turns out they're the world's largest rodents. Interesting. Locals are torn. Some think the animals are adorable, while others are demanding population control. So when you say you're torn, it means you're unsure or conflicted between two choices. Locals are torn. I'm torn between those two. Okay, great adjective. Meanwhile, authorities are weighing up options from sterilization programs to rodent birth control. Okay, so they're weighing up their options. They're thinking carefully about what options or choices they have before deciding. Okay, this is a fun and humorous story, but I guess even such a story raises a serious question about human encroachment on natural habitats. After all, who belongs where? Should we adapt to the wildlife, or does wildlife have to adapt to us? It's an interesting question that gives us food for thought. So I'd love to hear our Argentinian friend's opinion. What do you make of these capybaras? Live and let live, or should we take action to control them? And finally, a somber moment in global history where Pope Francis, the 266th Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, passed away peacefully on April 21st at the age of 88. So a somber moment, a sad moment. And Pope Francis passed away. So pass away is to die, but it's a polite or gentle way of saying it. Die sounds quite raw, whereas pass away sounds softer. Francis was often called a down-to-earth pope, known for his focus on social justice, the climate, and building bridges between different faiths. So down-to-earth is a great adjective, and it means humble, simple, not pretentious. Down-to-earth. Very normal, not arrogant, more down-to-earth. And as a sign of that nature, he requested a simple funeral and was buried at the Basilica of St. Mary Maggiore, I guess in Italian, in Rome. There was a huge turnout for the funeral. Okay, a turnout is the number of people who go to an event. As Catholics from all over the world flocked to Rome to pay their respects. So to flock here is like birds flocking together. They move in large number to Rome. Catholics from around the world flocked to Rome to pay their respects. When you pay your respects, you show your honour or remember someone, especially when they have died at a funeral. So, for example, if someone dies, you go to the funeral to pay your respects to the family and all that. Okay, so last week the Catholic community was in mourning, and Italy as a country was in mourning, meaning feeling or showing deep sadness after someone dies. To mourn somebody is the verb mourn, yeah? And that phrase in mourning is often used at this time. The death of Pope Francis marks the end of an era and the start of a time of reflection about what comes next. And that leaves us with some food for thought. What does come next for the Catholic Church? Given all of the changes in geopolitics and culture wars and divisions and split opinions, it's going to be very interesting to see which direction the Catholic Church decides to take. Is it going to lean to the right and vote a more conservative pope? Or is it going to keep in the same way as Pope Francis, more liberal, more about building bridges rather than, sticking to a traditional doctrine? Definitely one to keep an eye on in the coming weeks. Okay, guys, so 5 interesting news stories from around the world that gives you some nice vocabulary to learn, and at least now you can talk about these news items in class or with your colleagues, with friends, in English using the right vocabulary, and, it's a good way of learning English on one hand, and at the same time, you're able to talk about relevant issues in today's world. So I'll be doing that every week. I'll take 5 news stories. We'll break down some of the language. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about what food for thought it provides. And then you can continue the discussion at home with friends or family or with students and colleagues. Now, I've been asking some of you to come up with some questions to ask me, so you can get to know me a little bit, because many of you know me, but some of you, I guess, are new followers, and I'd love for you to get to know me as a teacher and as a person, and that's why I encourage you to ask me anything. And at the end of each podcast every week, I will answer some of the most interesting questions. So Ava Suarez puts this question to me. I would like to know the differences and similarities between traditional teaching and online teaching. And I would also like to know how different you are as a teacher from when you started. Okay, this is a great question, because I started, like most teachers do, working face-to-face and teaching in front of a group of students from all around the world in an academy in Cork. And as intimidating and daunting as it was at the time, I got used to it, and I really loved teaching face-to-face. I was working in an academy for a couple of years where I had various groups, different levels, also took some exam classes for Cambridge, and I liked the classroom environment. It's more dynamic, obviously, than, working online. There are so many things I miss about it. But like anything, there are pros and cons. Now, where I teach online, things, I guess, are a little more convenient for me, also for my students. Perhaps it's easier for them to access classes in the first place because I'm able to teach people from around the world. And at the same time, they can do it from the comfort of their home. Now, the downside of teaching online is that you don't have that dynamic environment where you can play interactive games, you can use flashcards, you can make use of the whiteboard and all that, and I really feel that. There are many tools out there, artificial intelligence, and also some platforms and plugins that people, teachers, colleagues use and used to good effect, I think. I tend not to use too many tools, and I keep things quite simple in my lessons. But I am also aware that I have plenty of room for improvement when it comes to making my lessons more dynamic, because even though I'm teaching online now for a couple of years, I still feel like it's missing some of that interaction and dynamism that you get in person. But as I said before, there are pros and cons to everything. And the second part of Ava's question is, how different a teacher are you now from when you started? I always feel that I'm a work in progress with everything. This is probably why it took me so long to come up with a podcast, because I feel like I'm not the finished article yet. And as a result, I'm probably my own biggest critic when it comes to my work, and I'm constantly looking for ways to improve and to hone my skills as a teacher. Ways in which I've changed since I started. I guess I know the English language like the back of my hand now, and I am better able to explain things, and I'm also better able to pick up on, the classic mistakes of people from different countries. I've got a lot of students from Spain, from Ukraine, Italy, elsewhere, and, with time comes experience, and there are probably some things that I'm not as good as I used to be, and maybe as I'm older, I'm not as fun. But I think I've learned a lot, and I think that as teachers we're also students of the language, and I always try to put myself on the side of the student. So it's kind of a teamwork, and we're in it together, and we're trying to figure this complicated language out together, hand in hand. And now a slightly different question from Zaina, I think your name is. It's been a while now that you've been a vegetarian. Could you tell us what led you to take the less travelled path? Well, I'm a vegetarian, but I do eat fish on occasion or from time to time, just to get a little bit of protein and to kind of to balance it out, I guess. I wish I were a vegan. I've tried. It's very hard to give up cheese for me. I've cut down a lot. I haven't eaten beef or chicken or lamb or pork in 8 years now, I think. But how it started, Zaina, basically I was flying to Iceland on holiday, and I had the book from Noah Yuval Harari called Sapiens, and I was reading a part of the book that talked about the domestication of pigs and animals, and it really kind of shocked me and left me thinking long after I'd finished the book. So I finished the book on the plane, on the flight. And as we were traveling around Iceland, I kept on kind of ruminating on the idea of the suffering of animals and all that. And I decided on the flight back from Iceland, I said, okay, that's it. Enough's enough. No more meat. And since that moment, I think March 2017, I haven't touched meat, apart from fish from time to time. And I have to say, one of the best decisions I've made. It has made my life a little more inconvenient, but fortunately these days there are plenty of options for vegetarians. As I said, I would love to be a vegan one day, maybe, because I've given up eating meat on account of the suffering of animals, and I still feel they do suffer, and I feel like I can survive without it, but it's not easy. There are plenty of options these days, restaurants, meat alternatives, substitutes, you name it. But cooking is even more challenging because you have to be more inventive. And at the same time, I work out a lot. I do a lot of sport, and I try to hit my protein targets daily, weekly. And it's not easy because, I've cut down on dairy and, not getting a lot of protein from whey, yogurt, milk products means that there aren't many other sources. Some vegetables, of course, and plants and legumes. But it's been quite tough, I have to say. It's a daily challenge, but 8 years later, I'm still going strong, and I feel as strong and healthy as ever. Here's an interesting question from Antonina. What's a moment in your teaching or travels that has really stayed with you? Wow, great question. In my teaching, I think when I look back, it's not so much from classes themselves, but it's what people do afterwards. When I have students for a certain length of time, and then later they go on to work in an English-speaking environment, or they get their certification, and even, many of my students are teachers. And if I can instill a little bit of confidence and some good language and a good approach to the language in somebody, then I think that makes my job worthwhile. Now, it doesn't happen all the time, but there's no standout moment from my teaching that has stayed with me. It's just the general sense of satisfaction I get when people do well, because I'm here to help people, and when they do well, it's like, okay, my hard work has paid off. And from travels, I've traveled quite a bit. I traveled to India with a broken leg in a cast and with crutches. So that was a massive learning experience for me. Looking back, I don't know how I did it. I don't know how I went to India on crutches in a cast and travelled around. But it toughened me up, and it was an eye-opening experience being in India, and also being in India like with a handicap and not being able to move freely was like, okay, this is a challenge. Are you going to rise to the challenge, John? Fortunately, everything worked out okay. Okay, guys, so that's the end of this week's podcast, this week's Johncast. Sorry. Okay, so I hope the news story sparked some new thoughts for you and maybe a few questions. And also some of the questions that I managed to answer at the end. I felt a little under pressure answering some of them, but very interesting questions, and keep them coming. You can write to me on social media. You can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is John+English. Okay. And you can also search for my channel on Telegram, where I share a lot of content. And if you have enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with friends, colleagues, students, whomever. Okay, guys, so until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep learning.